Today, I decided to give you guys a ranking of the King Kong films. This is a series of films that I've always loved and has been ongoing since the 1930s. The first one was released in 1933 and is still ongoing to this day. This is a very entertaining series of films that essentially is an action adventure series starring a giant ape called King Kong. So, without further ado, let's get started. Coming in last place is 1933's Son of Kong. This is an enjoyable film that was basically the continuation of the original film that shows some of the characters from the first film returning to the island and finding out Kong has a living son on that island. He's much smaller than his father, about 12 feet, and he's an albino ape. It's a fun movie, but it's barely over an hour, only coming in at 69 minutes. And it basically shows Carl Denham from the first movie returning to the island to find a treasure to help pay off his debts after Kong destroyed much of the city in the original film. It's not a bad movie, but it does feel kind of rushed, and it literally came out only 9 months after the original film. But it's still entertaining, and for what it is, not a bad movie. Up next, we have 2005's King Kong, directed by Peter Jackson. This film does have some exciting fights in it. King Kong looks great. The visual effects, for the most part, look pretty damn good. But unfortunately, the film just kind of drags. It's not a bad movie by any means, but you basically take the same plot as the original and you make it 3 hours long. That just doesn't work. I know that Peter Jackson wanted a big spectacle movie, but honestly, I feel that it's just too bloated and too overlong. You could have had this be a 2 hour movie and it would have been the same film. Not a bad movie by any means, but I do think that it's just kind of an overindulgent mess at times. It did, however, have a really badass video game called Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie. If you have a 360, PS2, or original Xbox, I highly recommend this game. It's fun as hell, and you play as not only Jack Driscoll, but Kong. And it's a fun shooter slash monster beat 'em up game that does not get enough love. Highly recommended. Up next, we have 2017's Kong Skull Island. Not a bad film, essentially another remake of the original film, but this one shows a group of Vietnam veterans as well as a group of scientists going to the island in order to try to find the Hollow Earth. A fun and enjoyable film that stars Tom Hiddleston as well as Brie Larson, Samuel Jackson, John C. Reilly. It's basically an all-star studded cast. Hell, John Goodman's even along for the ride. Not a bad film, but I do think it gets a little too bogged down in some of the stylish elements and kind of ignores the more important story elements. It's okay, but I think the tone could have been more consistent. Up next, we have 1967's King Kong Escapes. Unlike the first Japanese King Kong film, King Kong vs. Godzilla, this one is a actually dual American production, meaning instead of having American scenes inserted later, this film actually was made with American and Japanese actors at the same time, and you get a much better result. Nothing feels tacked on like the American version of King Kong vs. Godzilla. This feels like a very solid made film. But unfortunately, unlike its predecessor, although this is not technically a sequel, I find this one's cast to not be quite as enjoyable. But the action is better this time around. Kong looks a lot better, and it's a fun ride. It's hard to believe this is rated G. It's actually quite violent for a G-rated movie. It probably should be like PG-13 or at least PG. But a fun adventure that culminates in Kong fighting off a robot Kong made by an evil scientist who's looking to get a chemical that can be sold to this woman who wants to have her country rule the world. It's a crazy plot, but a fun movie nonetheless. Up next is 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla. This film is entertaining, but it does have some flaws. And what I mean by that is, well, the natives on the island, which is not Skull Island this time, it's Faroe Island, are Japanese people wearing blackface. I don't know what they were thinking, but there you go. It was the 60s. People didn't quite think things through as much. An entertaining film all the same, but this Kong suit looks kind of bad. Well, not kind of bad, really bad. And the action's not quite as good as King Kong Escapes, but I do enjoy the cast more and the story more, and I do recommend this film. Very entertaining, if not silly, and a bit goofy. Up next is 1986's King Kong Lives. I actually really enjoy this film. This film is a follow-up to 1976's King Kong, and it shows Kong survive getting blasted to shit by helicopter fire and falling off the Twin Towers. I don't know how he survived that, but he's King Kong, so we'll just accept it. This film actually stars Linda Hamilton 2 years after Terminator. Look at Linda there. Look at her rain-drenched face. It's an entertaining follow-up to the original, and while not believable in any sense, it is pretty cool. King Kong needs a heart transplant this time around because of the damage he took in the first film. There's obviously no creature that can give him a heart of his size, so they built him a fake heart. But there's another problem. He needs a blood transfusion. And where do they find that? In a female Kong, discovered in the jungles of the Amazon. What happens next is Kong gets out, and he falls in love with this female Kong, and they go on an adventure across America trying to escape the military and hopefully find happiness away from human beings. A fun follow-up, even though it is a bit ridiculous. I just find this film to be very entertaining and enjoyable. Up next is the most action-packed film on this list, and that is Godzilla vs. Kong. The follow-up to Kong Skull Island and 2014's Godzilla shows the monsters battling it out as the humans try to stop the threat of Mechagodzilla and get Godzilla under control. It's a pretty cool story, and it even has Kong going to the center of the earth and finding a new kingdom to rule. And I just think this movie's batshit crazy. It's over the top, but it's so damn fun, and I highly recommend it. Action-packed, crazy. This movie knows exactly what it is, and it has a damn fun time with it. If you want a good movie, something that's entertaining, I highly recommend Godzilla vs. Kong. Number 2 will have to be the original 1933's King Kong. Directed by Marion C. Cooper, this film basically shows a film crew, along with a boat crew, going to an island to try to film a jungle adventure film. While on the island, they encounter a giant ape named King Kong, as well as some islanders who don't want them there. What happens is they go on an adventure to try to rescue the lead actress, Ann Darrow, played by Fay Wray, and along the way they encounter dinosaurs and creatures and other monsters. Eventually they rescue her, and they bring the ape back to New York, where he goes crazy and attacks the military as well as people on the streets, and eventually culminates in a battle with him and some airplanes on top of the Empire State Building. A classic through and through, and one that I highly recommend. Watch this movie. But none can beat the 1976 remake, King Kong. Whereas the Peter Jackson film didn't really try anything new, this film changes up the setting. It makes it more contemporary. It takes place in the 70s when the movie came out. It shows a character played by Charles Grodin wanting to go to the island to get oil instead of making a movie this time around. Along the way, they find a castaway played by Jessica Lange named Dwan. And there's also a wildlife photographer played by Jeff Bridges who stows away on the ship. And along the way, they run into Kong as well as the islanders, and an adventure ensues. Kong in this movie is just more powerful, bigger, more intimidating, and this time around it's a guy in a suit with an animatronic mask. And in my opinion, that's the best way they've ever made Kong. He's just the most believable here, the most powerful, the most interesting. Everything about this film, I love the atmosphere, the look, the feel, the music. Kong just feels like a beast in this movie. And that's one of the reasons I love it so much. It's just a very entertaining film through and through. And most people do prefer the original, even the Peter Jackson film. But I feel this film really captures the essence of this giant ape and this grand adventure. It's not quite as stylish as some of the other movies, but it basically is the most contemporary and the most serious of all the films, and the one that I enjoy the most. Well, that's my ranking. This video is kind of late, but I've been busy with work as of lately. But I'm glad I finally got this video out to you guys. I hope you enjoyed my list. If you'd like, leave your list down below. and peace out.